On paper, saucer separation sounds like one of the smartest ideas in science fiction. Protect civilians, reduce casualties, keep the mission alive. It's an elegant solution to one of the biggest problems any exploration vessel could face. So why did Starfleet rarely use it? And why did later generations of starships quietly abandon one of the Enterprise's most recognizable abilities? The answer isn't just about engineering. It's a story of changing technology, evolving threats, and how Star Trek itself transformed over nearly 60 years. To understand why saucer separation was invented, we have to go back to the philosophy that shaped Starfleet itself. Unlike many science fiction universes, Star Trek never envisioned its exploration vessels as pure warships. Starfleet ships were designed as flying cities. A Galaxy-class starship didn't just carry officers, it carried civilian scientists, diplomats, engineers, medical staff, teachers, and even entire families. At full capacity, the Enterprise D could accommodate well over 1,000 people. Children attended school on board, families lived in spacious quarters, researchers conducted long-term experiments. Some civilians could spend years aboard without ever setting foot on another Federation world. This reflected the optimistic vision created by Gene Roddenberry. Humanity had moved beyond constant warfare. Starfleet's greatest mission wasn't conquest. It was exploration, diplomacy, and scientific discovery. But the galaxy didn't always share those ideals. The Federation frequently encountered hostile powers like the Romulans, the Klingons before their alliance, and later the Borg and the Dominion. Every peaceful mission carried the possibility of sudden conflict. That raised a difficult question. How do you protect hundreds of civilians aboard what may suddenly become a battleship? Starfleet's answer was surprisingly elegant. Separate the ship. The Galaxy class was essentially two spacecraft permanently connected together. The saucer section contained the living quarters, laboratories, schools, recreation areas, diplomatic facilities, and much of the crew's daily life. The star drive section housed the warp core, primary engineering, main propulsion systems, heavy tactical systems, and the majority of the ship's raw power. In dangerous situations, the saucer could detach and retreat while the star drive continued the mission or the fight. On paper, it was a remarkable compromise. Starfleet could build one vessel capable of peaceful exploration during normal operations while instantly transforming it into a combat-focused starship whenever necessary. The civilians survived. The mission continued. Everyone won, at least in theory. From an engineering standpoint, making a starship separate safely is anything but simple. The docking connection between the saucer and the star drive isn't just a giant mechanical latch. It has to transfer structural loads across the entire ship, while also routing power, data, life support, computer systems, environmental controls, and hundreds of other critical connections. Every one of these systems must disconnect and reconnect flawlessly, often in a matter of seconds. The structural integrity field adds another layer of complexity. Rather than relying solely on the physical strength of the hull, Starfleet reinforces its ships with energy fields that help distribute enormous stresses throughout the vessel. During separation, those fields must instantly rebalance to keep both sections stable. Then there's propulsion. The saucer section doesn't carry its own warp core. Once detached, it relies primarily on impulse engines, allowing it to maneuver safely within a star system but not continue long-range missions at warp. The star drive section, meanwhile, retains the warp core, warp nacelles, engineering systems, and nearly all of the ship's offensive capabilities. In other words, Starfleet never intended to create two equal starships. It created one dedicated exploration and evacuation vessel and one ship built to finish the mission. But while the engineering was impressive, the real reason saucer separation existed had just as much to do with television production as it did with Starfleet doctrine. To understand why, we have to step outside the Star Trek universe. When Star Trek: The Next Generation entered production in the late 1980s, Gene Roddenberry wanted the new Enterprise to represent the Federation at its absolute peak. This wasn't supposed to be a larger version of Captain Kirk's ship. It was meant to symbolize a civilization that had become more advanced, more peaceful, and more confident than ever before. That philosophy shaped nearly every aspect of the Galaxy class. The ship was brighter, more spacious, and dramatically larger than its predecessors. Crew members no longer lived in cramped quarters. Families could accompany officers on deep space assignments. The Enterprise even included schools, holodecks, arboretums, lounges, and laboratories that rivaled those on the Federation worlds. In Roddenberry's vision, the Enterprise wasn't simply a warship. It was humanity's home among the stars. But that vision created a practical storytelling problem. If children and civilians lived aboard the ship, how could the writers justify sending it into life-threatening battles every week? Saucer separation became the perfect solution. Whenever the Enterprise faced extraordinary danger, the civilian population could evacuate in the saucer, while Captain Picard commanded the star drive section into combat. It preserved Roddenberry's optimistic vision while giving the writers the freedom to tell military-style stories when necessary. It was a clever compromise. In practice, however, it was rarely used. The very first episode of The Next Generation, Encounter at Farpoint, introduced the feature in spectacular fashion. The Enterprise separated before confronting the mysterious entity known as Q, immediately establishing the Galaxy class as something audiences had never seen before. Years later, the sequence returned in Star Trek Generations, this time with tragic consequences. After a surprise attack from the Klingon bird of prey commanded by the Duras sisters, the Enterprise D suffered catastrophic damage. Although the saucer separated successfully, the destruction of the star drive section left the saucer without power, forcing Commander Riker to crash-land it on the surface of Viridian 3. It remains one of the most memorable scenes in Star Trek history. Ironically, it also demonstrated one of the greatest weaknesses of the entire concept. Separating the ship didn't guarantee survival. If the star drive section was destroyed, the saucer could still become stranded, vulnerable, or unable to escape on its own. And that wasn't the only drawback. Although separating the ship protected civilians, it also reduced the Enterprise's flexibility. The saucer retained many crew members, scientific facilities, and support systems that could be valuable during extended missions. Once detached, reuniting the two sections required careful coordination and often specialized facilities. From a tactical standpoint, separation also consumed valuable time. In an unexpected ambush, Starfleet captains rarely had the luxury of calmly evacuating hundreds of civilians before the shooting started. Many engagements unfolded within minutes or even seconds, leaving little opportunity for an orderly separation. As Star Trek introduced increasingly dangerous enemies, those limitations became impossible to ignore. The Borg didn't announce their arrival hours in advance. Neither did Dominion attack fleets. By the time red alert sounded, there often wasn't enough time to separate the ship before combat had already begun. As the galaxy became more dangerous, Starfleet's priorities began to change. New classes of starships reflected this evolution. The Defiant class abandoned the idea entirely. Designed specifically to fight the Borg, it sacrificed comfort for firepower, armor, and maneuverability. There were no families on board and no need for civilian evacuation. The Sovereign class, introduced after the destruction of the Enterprise D, also omitted saucer separation despite becoming Starfleet's new flagship. While larger and far more powerful than the Galaxy class, its design emphasized combat readiness and operational efficiency over modular evacuation. Even ships built primarily for exploration, like the Intrepid class, relied on improved defensive systems rather than physical separation to protect their crews. In many ways, saucer separation had become a solution to a problem Starfleet no longer believed existed. Instead of building ships that transformed during emergencies, newer designs simply became better at surviving those emergencies in the first place. Yet despite its limited use, saucer separation never disappeared from Star Trek's identity. Why? Because it represented something far more important than a mechanical feature. It represented Starfleet's values. The Federation believed every life mattered. Its greatest starship wasn't designed around winning battles at any cost. It was designed around protecting explorers, scientists, diplomats, and families, even if doing so made the ship more complicated and more expensive to build. That philosophy stood in sharp contrast to many of Starfleet's rivals. Romulan warbirds prioritized stealth and intimidation. Klingon cruisers were built for honor and combat. Cardassian vessels emphasized military control. The Galaxy class placed civilian safety at the center of its design. Few engineering decisions illustrate the Federation's ideals more clearly than that. Could such a system ever work in reality? Surprisingly, parts of the idea aren't as far-fetched as they first appear. Modern spacecraft are already modular. Mission modules, detachable crew capsules, and emergency escape systems are all real engineering concepts. NASA's spacecraft separate stages throughout their missions, while future deep space vehicles may use detachable habitats or propulsion sections to simplify long-duration exploration. But a vessel the size of the Enterprise separating into two independently functioning spacecraft would present enormous engineering challenges. Every structural connection, power conduit, coolant line, computer network, and life support system would have to disconnect flawlessly under extreme conditions. The additional mass, maintenance, and complexity would almost certainly outweigh the benefits for most real missions. In other words, Star Trek wasn't predicting the future. It was expressing a philosophy through engineering. Saucer separation wasn't invented because it was the most efficient way to build a starship. It was invented because it reflected what the Federation believed a starship should be: a place where exploration mattered more than conquest, where civilians deserve protection even in the middle of a war, and where technology existed not simply to win battles, but to preserve life whenever possible. Perhaps that's why, decades later, the sight of the Enterprise gracefully dividing into two ships remains one of the most unforgettable moments in science fiction. Not because it was the most practical design ever imagined, but because it perfectly captured what made Star Trek different from every other franchise among the stars. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Star Trek's engineering and the ideas behind it, there are plenty more hidden stories waiting beneath the hulls of the Federation's most famous starships. Until next time, live long and prosper.